The dairy industry in New Hampshire, I feel, is in crisis. First of all, because it's harder and harder for any of us to make a profit. Most of us operate like day to day and on a shoestring.
The benefit of crisis is that people can really attack the cause issues of some of the problems. The current crisis has enabled us to really take hard looks at, okay, what do we need to do to ensure that there perhaps is a base price, that we've got good insurance, and that we can and should attack the issue of supply management. In dairy production, which you have milk produced 365 days a year, that's a very perishable product, then you must anticipate what your demand is going to be. And ideally, in countries where there is supply management, then each farm has a quota and they produce to that quota. And then that volume of milk they produce is changed each year. Demand and that the volume of milk then is adequate for the demands of consumers and manufacturing, and you have very little surplus, and therefore you can maintain a good price for the farmers, a price that reflects their cost of production, as they do in Canada. In conventional dairy, it's one of the cyclical things that they understand. You'll have 2 or 3 good years, 2 or 3 bad years, and it has got a long history of peaks and troughs. At this time, they're just coming out of a very long 6-year period of oversupply, and which has brought the pay price down as low as $14 or $15 per 100 pound of milk, when in the northeast it takes somewhere around, university research has shown it takes around $22 per hundredweight to produce it. So if you look at the economics, then you're getting $16 per 100 pound of milk, and it costs you $22, then you're suffering a loss that can't be sustained indefinitely.
Food is different from other sectors in the sense that market mechanisms of supply and demand don't work well when it comes to food and agriculture. If supply goes up and prices go down, that encourages farmers to produce more, exacerbating lower and decreasing prices. And if prices increase, people should have a pretty steady supply of the food that they need, and so they shouldn't be open to the volatilities of the global commodities market.
How the government affects us is just like it affects any small business. And we need to rely on our government for consistent world markets. Even your small local farms still market their products worldwide through their cooperatives, and the loss of world markets has tremendously hurt the local pay price amount. It's whether you're milking 30 cows or whether you're milking 10,000 cows, it's been a huge hit. And it's been a huge hit not just out in the Midwest or large milk sheds. It's also been a huge hit right here in New Hampshire.
Any supply management on the national side will run into problems from the point of view of the WTO and from the point of view of export and import markets. If you have a quota, you're saying, no, we're not going to allow X amount of products and dairy powders and cheese to come in because we have a surplus, so you protect your market. Now that makes sense from a US point of view, but there are laws and regulations about world trade.
So that's why in 1999, civil society took to the streets in resistance to the Agreement on Agriculture, which came into force in 1995 with the creation of the World Trade Organization. And there, as 50,000 people took to the streets in Seattle and said no to a new round of trade negotiations, we were saying agriculture should not be within the ambit of trade. Always before that, food security was always considered a domestic issue that governments should be able to have control over the food security of their countries. But since we eat 3 times a day, it was attractive to agribusiness to globalize trade in agriculture, liberalize it, and move it into the market sphere. There's an important role for farmers in government and in communication with farmers to do supply management, to set floor prices. Right now in dairy, the prices are so low that we're seeing so many dairies go out of business, and they're the cornerstone of local agricultural economies.
So New Hampshire is a milk deficit state. We produce about 50% of the milk that the state needs to consume. So some of New Hampshire's milk has to come from out of state.
So for a long time, we've been locked into an economic development model that's based on a way of thinking, a neoliberal way of thinking, that was exemplified several decades back by Maggie Thatcher as TINA. There is no alternative. There is no alternative to neoliberalism or the economic globalization model that deregulates, privatizes, and liberalizes markets or opens them up to trade. And so she was saying we have basically the option of isolating and just staying in our local region, or globalizing. But that was a really false dichotomy, and we have a lot of different options, one of which is called import substitution, which is just a fancy way of saying that what we can produce locally we should, rather than importing things. And so in New Hampshire and regions around the world, many people are trying to localize their production. So here in New Hampshire, if we can be growing staple goods that we use on a regular basis, we should be. And then if we can't produce them locally, we can import them and internalize the full costs of that transportation and all the ecological and social costs to that trade in goods. So really we could be increasing dramatically the amount of local food that we're growing here in New Hampshire for local consumption.
So milk price is regulated, milk marketing and milk price of fluid milk is regulated by a federal organization, a federal government organization called the Federal Milk Marketing Order. And that order regulates what milk buyers have to pay, what wholesale milk buyers have to pay for what we call class 1 milk or fluid milk, the milk which is milk that you would drink, not ice cream, not cheese, not powdered milk, but fluid milk that you drink. The Federal Milk Marketing Order allows a dairy farmer to process up to 150,000 pounds of their milk production per month. Once the farmer processes more than 150,000 pounds of their own production, then everything that above the 150,000 pounds that goes into the wholesale market, there's no control over that price. It's whatever you can get it sold for. Usually it's class 3 or 4 price, which is anywhere from $3 to $4 to $5 lower than what you get on the normal wholesale market. There's a number of things that need to be tweaked on the federal milk order. It needs to be brought up to date. For us at this farm, one of the biggest things would be raising that exemption from the 150,000 pounds to either 1 million or 3 million pounds.
Part of the cheap food policy is to encourage large-scale production, and that's a fact that has been recognized both from the point of view of subsidy directed at farm operations, and because of market demands. As the demand for cheaper product on the agricultural side, then what we've seen is a lot more consolidation on both the conventional side and the organic side. In organic dairy, we've most recently seen two of the largest manufacturers of organic product, dairy product in the world, take by probably half of the organic dairy production in the US.
On your local dairy farms, we're tremendously affected by monopolies, from the seed that we put in the ground to the crop protectants that we use to protect our crops to the feed that we feed our cattle, and right down to how we're able to market the milk that comes off the farm, or how we market the beef as the animals leave the farm. It's all controlled by huge monopolies. In the dairy industry, we have 2 places that we can sell our milk, and we have 4 major processing players in New England, and 2 of them are owned by one of the same companies, and that same company controls the milk going into the other 2.
It affects not only the immediate farm and obviously the farm family, but it has a dramatic effect on the rural community when you have farms going out of operation. And this last year has seen a record number, not just in the Northeast, but in the Midwest and the West, of farms going bankrupt or deciding to move out of milk production. That affects both the employment in the area, but also all the service industries, and the multiplier effect of having a strong agricultural base to the community disappears. And so the effect of the lack of thought and action on the marketing and supply side affects the whole of society.
Most Americans don't realize what are the real cost of having cheap food. It's great that you can go to Walmart and get really cheap milk, but there's a cost to that. First off, there's a cost in terms of the quality of the food product you're getting. There's a cost to the farmer who isn't making a livable wage. There's a cost to your local community when that milk is no longer produced there and it's exported out west. There's a cost out west where they're running out of water to produce this milk. And so at some point, climate predictions predict that they will not have water to continue to sustain that. And so at some point, this current system that is producing our cheap food won't be able to exist anymore. And then food will become very expensive. And so I think the benefit of investing in local food hubs and local food systems now is, 1, we can avoid a potential crisis, 2, create a healthier food product, 3, create more food access for people, and also boost our local economy.
It's been well proven, both the success of organic and the success of the buy local programs, that consumers will pay extra. And so the problem isn't with the consumers. They'll pay extra, and even those consumers that might not have enough, might be on a low income, will pay extra to provide organic milk for their children. They might drink non-organic or non-local milk for themselves, but they are willing to pay the extra because they recognize the benefits both in the product itself and to their environment. So that issue of educating consumers is really not a problem. It's more the education of the retailers and the processors and the buyers, that consumers think that organic farmers are getting more for their product, whereas in fact increasingly organic farmers aren't getting more.
Here in our dairy program, we produce healthy soils through good grazing management techniques. When you're allowing the plants enough time to recover, their roots will grow deeper, and through that process they're able to help sequester carbon from the atmosphere. And so when we overgraze and then we go back and we continuously graze, we're not allowing for the root growth that will help sequester carbon. And so how you manage the grazing is critically important to achieving that result. So with holistic planned grazing and holistic land management, we're basically managing 4 ecosystem processes: the mineral cycle, the community dynamics, so that's all the plants, animals, insects that live out here, the energy flow, photosynthesis from the sun to green plants, creating energy that the cows then eat, and then the water cycle as well. And so when you're managing your land well, the water that filters through here and runs out to the brook should be clean and pristine, and so it can help create clean water if you're managing your grazing system in a manner that doesn't pollute. So we don't want runoff from the manure or any lime or wood ash that we would add to our fields to penetrate the water system. I think one thing that farmers need support in converting to healthy soil practices such as no or low till or cover cropping, they need support. And to convert those systems, it takes extra time, it takes experimentation to get the cover crop rotation systems right, and they need to know that there's a market that's going to support that. And so right now there is, we're supporting with commodity subsidies, large-scale industrial agriculture that is causing huge environmental impacts, and so I think we need to shift those subsidies to support some of this innovation that's going on around healthy soil practices for farmers, and specifically to support some of the smaller scale farmers.